We're not necessarily going to go in depth into the conference over the weekend, but let's have a look at the story, basically giving us a summary of what was been going on, including, one particular law that's been tried all over the world before that doesn't work, that of course National's going to give a crack again to.
The National Party is promising to get tougher on criminal sentences if it gets into power. Currently, judges can use their discretion and reduce sentences for mitigating factors, but National wants to limit those cuts to 40% of the recommended sentence. It would also bring back a version of the three strikes law, and it would scrap cultural reports which review the offender's history and what may have led to their offending. That costs about $20 million over 4 years.
You got to ask why they would do that. Now, I'm being really honest with you. I can't think off the top of my head right now of an issue, a cultural issue that may lead to offending. But if there are some, and I'm thinking about like if a culture is particularly more patriarchal, is much more likely to use corporal or capital punishment with children, that might lead to something else. There could be, I think, very easily a way that doesn't. Yeah, sorry, you go.
Sorry, just point of clarification. I think the use of the term cultural in this isn't talking about a culture or ethnicity. They're talking about basically the offender's background in general.
Yeah, but I guess that's kind of what I was saying. Maybe I was clunky about it. Like if they were raised in a particular household, okay, forget the word that I use, culture. I misspoke. I was thinking it differently and said it wrongly. Thank you, dyslexia. The way that they were raised. I mean, like if you were abused when you were raised, it's a high probability you'll go on to abuse compared to the general population.
Yeah.
So if you are now going to ignore that altogether as to why someone abused, I don't know why you would get round of it. Even if it's, let's say, even if it's let's be honest, even if it was a waste of money, but it was looking at the conversation, it's $20 million. What are you losing? What if there's a percentage of people that it is relevant to?
It's really important information. Like, what are the common factors when it comes to offenders? And that sort of thing. Like, people are looking at these reports as it's just a way of getting a discount off your sentence, but it's painting an enormous picture of what the problems in our society are and how. Like, if you keep seeing the same thing, oh, this person did this because his school years was shitty.
Yeah.
And these were the factors that caused it. You can go, well, if we're going to stop the next generation doing it, we need to solve that factor. Yeah, it's the big picture thinking that National hate. They want the short fix.
Or I wonder if what National's done has got the wrong end of the stick. Like I explained that very badly. I was talking about, it sounded like I was talking about cultures when I was talking about the culture. Maybe they've looked at it and said, well, it's got the word culture in it, so we've got to cancel it. Maybe they've gone down that path. Because if anything has got culture in it, it means, like, why would we have to look at cultures and see their background? Maybe that's the reason for just cancelling it.
I think there is a perception of that as well. Exactly the same way that I jumped on it there. It's like, oh, white people don't have culture.
Right.
And it's like, you can be a white offender, a European offender, and have a cultural report done that says that your European parents were shitty and you went through the same things. You would get the same discounts. It's just, we don't really see that so much on, well, say with wealthier offenders. It's more about they get a discount or get off completely scot-free because it's damaging their opportunities in the future. We don't really talk about that with some other offenders. We just look at their past.
Really interesting.
They don't have a future.
How about this is a comment from Isbay. National is pandering to Winston voters. Interesting. Really, really interesting perspective. Really interesting perspective. Let's keep going with this report, eh?
They would instead funnel that money towards victims. As political reporter Amelia Wade explains, their plan is totally uncosted.
So that's an interesting point. Sorry, I will let it go. But the culture of, they'll get rid of the cultural sort of reports and they'll funnel it towards victims. So what if someone has been raised being abused all their life, and because of that they go on to continue offending? Are they the offender, or are they the victim, or are they both? So are you going to take the money away from their offence and give it back to them as the victim of, like, how does that work? Because you can be both. Well, you can be offending because of the victim, what you went through as a victim. How does that, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it just, anyway, maybe it's that whole, we haven't thought this through.
But was received to rapturous applause at the party's national conference today.
Who's that waiting for their celebrity CEO entrance? Why, it's Christopher Luxon, of course.
National is coming back.
Consider National's rank and file rallied.
Labor will give you excuses. I'm telling you, National will give you results.
Just one quick
Notice he didn't say National will give you ideas, because that's not what they do.
little excuse from Luxon today, though, after saying in a promo video he's loved the Crusaders since he was a wee lad.
Why I love them? Because I loved them since I was a little boy.
Even though the team didn't exist until he was 26.
Anyone who comes from that part of the world knows exactly what we're talking about. The Crusaders, Canterbury Crusaders, Canterbury, they're all my team.
And all these people are Luxon's team who he's hoping will score a win at the election. Today's drive forward was a pitch to limit how much judges could reduce sentences for mitigating circumstances.
National will restore real consequences for crime with stronger sentences for convicted criminals.
So restore is an interesting one, because we're not going to, we'll keep going, Cherie, not to cut you short, but you can come back. Restore from what? Nothing's changed. Do you know what I'm saying? Nothing's changed in sentencing. Nothing's been altered. Nothing's, so what does he do? It does feel, and we're not going to talk about this now, Cherie, else we'll never get through the clip, but we will come back to it. And I've tweeted about this over the weekend, that get New Zealand back on track relation to make America great again. Like, is it a conscious decision? Is it not? Because there's that obvious connection where you say to, Americans, when was America great? And some of them will say, like in the 1960s, and you're like where segregation was around. Is that what you're saying? Or they say, when it was founded, 1776, like with that slavery stuff. Like, when was it actually great? So when were we on track, Mr. Luxon? Has to be a question that he gets asked and asked and asked and asked, because it does feel, and I'm happy to have this debate, and I'm sure people in the chat will have something to say about it. Is this just a terrible slogan that's going to allow them to be attached to the MAGA vibe, or is it an intentional slogan because they want to be attached to the MAGA vibe?
It's a terrible slogan, and I'll explain why later.
There we go.
An increase in a sentence doesn't naturally flow to then reducing crime. In fact, quite the opposite. It can increase crime because, especially for youths or young people going into a prison system.
National would also extend rehab to everyone in prison, including those on remand awaiting trial or sentencing.
And with nearly 1 in 2 prisoners.
I wonder about that. I'm being a bit pedantic now, but if you're giving rehabilitation to those on remand and those awaiting trial, so if you're awaiting trial, you're innocent because you're innocent until proven guilty. So if you're getting rehab while you're waiting trial, why? What are you saying, National? Are you first wasting money on innocent people who don't need it, or are you saying everyone that's charged is guilty of a crime requiring rehabilitation?
Prisoners being on remand, that means a significant proportion of prisoners are missing out on the opportunity for proper rehabilitation.
Well, I think everything that Mr. Luxon said was very sensible, really.
Especially the
Wait for the diversity in these commentators.
Rehabilitation of every prisoner.
I think it will deter a wee bit of crime.
With the conference now wrapped, the base is leaving happy with a tougher sentencing policy. But the same cannot be said for all of those in the judiciary. News Hub spoken to one retired judge who says the National Party clearly doesn't trust the ones who are handing down the sentences, and even said the policy was akin to putting judges in a straitjacket. Does the National Party trust judges?
Oh, we do, but we're just making sure we find the balance to be able to give them the amount of discretion that they need. But equally, we need to make sure the public can see that there are fair sentences for the crimes that are appropriate to the crimes that are committed.
I think it's an egregious overreach myself. There's a big reason for why there is so much discretion held by the judiciary. They see far more than you and I will ever see, and that's essentially part of the trust that we have to have in the judicial system.
Labor says it's also egregious that the Nats don't know how much it costs a year to keep one.
Just remember this. How much the Nats are saying, I'll go back. How much the National constantly talks about, Labor doesn't know what's going on. They don't know what their budgets are. They don't know the economy. Listen to this. This is hilarious.
Says it's also egregious that the Nats don't know how much it costs a year to keep one person in prison.
It's around 100,000.
193,000.
A lot.
And no idea how much it'll cost to have more prisoners locked up for longer.
We'll be able to answer all those questions when he's the Prime Minister and we're in government.
National grabbing at every vote it can to make that happen. Amelia Wade, News.
Now, if Labor comes out this year and they say, I don't know how much it's going to cost, we'll worry about it after the election, what do you think National is going to say to that? Anyway, Chewy, I haven't let you talk. I've been a big overpowering patriarch here. You go at it, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. National should be fucking lashed for going, here's our policy, here's our big unveil. We have no fucking idea how much it costs. We're the party of the economy, and we're the only ones that know numbers. We don't know these numbers, but we are definitely the party of the numbers that.
And we're going to manage the economy better than these guys. Well, how much is this going to take out of? How much is this going to take out of your managing?
No idea.
I don't know, but we're going to be better, and we're going to manage it better, and we're going to do better.
I also like from that press conference the shuffling and rotating of like, do you know the answer to that? Okay, you had the mic. Oh, back to Mitchell. Just a debacle. I want to talk a little bit about that slogan that they seem to love.
Yep.
Get New Zealand back on track. Now, they might as well just drop one of the words. Just drop on. Because most of the time when Luxon says something, there's a backtrack coming. And it also plays into exactly what we've talked about, the problem with National. It's always looking over its shoulder. It's always going back. We're going backwards. We've got an idea that we had before. You know, it's my whole problem of like, if I was in the centre and couldn't make up my mind, I would want someone with an aspiration rather than a harking back to the way it used to be, because we know it's rose-tinted glasses and that sort of thing. Show me your hopes for the country, not for winding the country back. But that's who he's talking to. Look at that room.
Yeah.
These are people that their lives have mostly passed them by. And they've got rose-tinted glasses about the way that things used to be. I didn't have to learn any Māori words. I don't like how they're pronouncing the weather on the news. You know, those sort of people. I believe in the Canterbury Crusaders that have been around, as we know, for 108 years. It's just so disappointing.
I also think this has been clipped by a few people today. The point with
let's talk about consent, shall we?
Mr. Luxon grabbing the hand of his co-leader here, and she didn't look at this bit. Oh no,
she did not look so. What the fuck are you doing?
No, yeah, that's been
I'm not your wife.
By various things. Yeah. What about holding the hands of your
No,
you know,
don't do that. We did discuss this earlier. Is how I read that. Look, we're going to come back to them being tough on crime, right? The same arguments apply, and nobody's pushing back. Well, some people are pushing back on it, but it's like these things that they want to try, they've tried before, and they didn't work here.
Yep.
These are things that have been tried overseas. They didn't work there either. 3 strikes comes from America, and it absolutely spiked their prison population and was targeted at African Americans.
And if you don't know how much it costs to keep a prisoner, if you don't know how much it costs to keep a prisoner, how can you project a budget for next year when you're the government, if you are the government? And look, I want to say this publicly, actually. They very well may be the government. Like, I've had a few fun bits. One of the things about being sick in my chair with a cold over the weekend, you can probably still hear it in my voice a little bit, was I spent far too much time on Twitter, basically trolling, having some fun. And a bunch of people were like, yeah, you'll see when he's Prime Minister. I'm like, yeah, he might be a Prime Minister. It's 50-50 at the moment. You know, it's like, honestly, if I was to choose Chewy, I'd say right now they've got a National Act, have got a slight edge. I'd say right now, if you're placing odds, they're probably slight favourites. They're 12 and under. Sorry, it's a rugby term, Chewy. I
was that from the Canterbury Crusaders from back in the 60s?
The Canterbury Blue Saders or something. And look, what you were saying and what others have been saying about being like, when are they going to come up with something that inspires? This is from News Hub Nation over the weekend. Carmen Parahi asking the question about where are the big ideas from National. Well, this is, and we've been talking about this for a long time. Anything that's aspirational, that's inspirational, that sticks with New Zealanders for the next 40 years comes from Labour. I've asked this 10 times and no one has given me a policy yet that's come from National that this country will fight to keep tooth and nail, that the other party has to keep in or they won't get elected. You know, whether it's the state housing, the free healthcare, working for families, interest-free student loans, any of those things, National had to then take on board because and agree that they wouldn't get rid of them because they're beloved by everyone. There's no policy coming from National anywhere. No one's given me one that would be the other way, that Labour has to take on board or they'll lose an election. Not one in 100-ish years, well, 70-ish years, not one. And so here's Carmen Parahi talking on News Hub Nation in the weekend. Not quite as black and white as that, but similar idea around big ideas.
Okay. One of the
they
things
didn't address the fact that National helped cause the housing problem because they had such an open immigration policy, right? Because they had, when Key was in power, right? So they had a huge immigration policy. We allowed more and more migrants in, which was great for economy, great for business, not so good for housing. We didn't fix our housing issues. We still haven't fixed them properly yet. So the fact that he said today, we're all about housing, I'm like, well, you didn't actually say that you stuffed it up
maybe
in the first place,
okay.
right?
Well,
so,
no, but no political party ever says, oh, yeah, look, we've really got it wrong. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
We're just going to say, let's look at the future.
I'm waiting and waiting for something from National to give us something substantive. There's nothing wrong with simplistic at all, but there's nothing substantive from them yet.
And there's nothing to be gained by having a shot at gangs and saying that is the solution to the problems of law and order in Aotearoa.
Or having a shot at health inequities for Māori, right? So we had this huge debate earlier this week around the new health inequity tool that's being used. Quite rightly, ethnicity is just one of the markers. Not all of them, is just one of 5.
There was a focus, and there was a focus on...
And so Luxon talked about, we shouldn't have Māori and Pacifica shouldn't be on this, and so did Shane Reti, which is problematic because it actually doesn't show us that they understand that there is huge inequities for Māori and for Pacifica in our health system.
All right.
Boom.
Yeah.
I think that's what the kids call a mic drop. Well, the kids from the 2000s call that a mic drop.
All of those things that they've talked about, you know, we didn't have a chance to touch on the health inequities aspect and that sort of thing. But all of these things, you look at what National are proposing or what they're talking about, and then you immediately go and look for someone that works in there, that's actually an expert in there. And they're all going, it doesn't work. This doesn't work. Like the health inequity thing, that blew up. Oh my God, the people in the comments of the news story and that were scandalized. It didn't matter that it had been working that way for 2 years. And it was never an issue until now, because we've got to stoke up some racial division to get the election popping for us, because we're pushing shit uphill. And this is the thing that I want everybody listening to take on board. It's fucking working. It is working. It is motivating people to vote that way. And we've said this on the show before. The left doesn't vote, then we don't win. And there are people that go, oh, there's no point in voting because they're all the same. You need to go out and find those people in your circle that say those sort of things and convince them otherwise, and be persuasive, because these guys are just going for straight emotion rather than facts, and that'll win them an election, and it's worked before.
It's a good slogan, that, eh? If the left vote, the left wins.
Almost like someone should put it on a T-shirt.
Yeah. And someone should fucking wear that T-shirt in the next broadcast, maybe.
I should. It's actually sitting in the kitchen. Yeah, like people are going to focus on the fact that you just fucking told me off.